Gemellus was dead. Agrippinilla's first cousin, the last grandson of Tiberius, was ordered by Caligula to take his own life soon after the emperor had emerged from his mysterious illness. Tragically, Gemellus had not known how to go about the deed. His face white with terror and his voice trembling, he had been forced to ask the guards how to do it. Agrippinilla sighed. The boy had never posed a threat to her, nor to anyone. Barely 18 years old, he had only tried to please those senators who, fearing Caligula's death, had made him believe the empire depended on him. And now he was gone, along with all those who had attempted to secure their own positions through him. A rolling movement in her swollen belly drew her attention. Her time was coming. She could feel it, the shift in her balance, the tight tug at the base of her spine. The child stirred often now, cramped and running out of room, as if it too sensed the world drawing near. She carried low, and so the midwives insisted it would be a boy. But Agrippinilla kept that to herself. Why promise her husband something she couldn't be sure of delivering? But a boy would be ideal. Her brother had just killed his heir, and was promised to Ennia, a woman unlikely to bear more children. Livilla, married to Marcus Vinicius, had produced only a daughter, a little girl named Venetia, and Drusilla had given her husband no children at all. Caligula would need an heir, and Agrippinilla's family, from the time of Julius Caesar, had always known how to make nephews into sons. Following Caligula's illness, the wild and raucous parties that had once dominated the Palatium gave way to something colder. The feast remained, the wine still flowed, and the tables were still laden with roasted boar and silver dishes of honeyed dates. But the spirit had changed. The laughter seemed rehearsed now, and the dancers were fewer. In place of Bacchic frenzy came the order of formality, couches arranged just so, invitations issued through official channels, and guest lists monitored by men, who never drank. What had once been nights of mystery and excess, whispered about in corridors and stammered over in the Senate, had become structured affairs, stiff with ceremony. Even the seating order had changed. Where once Ennia Thrasilla had reclined beside Caligula on the lectus medius, the central couch of the triclinium, she now found herself demoted to the side couches among Agrippinilla, Livilla, and their husbands. Caligula now shared the lectus medius with Drusilla, a detail Agrippinilla was certain did not sit well with Macro. As Agrippinilla shifted, trying to get comfortable on the crowded couch between her husband and her uncle Claudius, she felt Caligula's eyes on her. He sat at the head of the room, wine cup in hand, watching. She stilled herself, then raised her cup in return. "How long before the child arrives?" he asked, tone warm, but eyes unreadable. Agrippinilla straightened, hope rising. "Very soon," she replied softly. "The midwives are waiting for the baby to drop. We leave for Antium in the morning. They're certain the peacefulness will encourage an easy birth." She hesitated, then pressed forward. "They promise me it will be a boy. Would you like the honour of naming him?" For a moment, Agrippinilla let herself imagine it. Her brother naming the child after himself, a symbolic gesture that might lead to adoption, or at the very least, favour. Caligula swirled the wine in his cup, gaze still fixed on her. Then his eyes narrowed. "You don't want to name him after your husband?" Agrippinilla's mouth opened, but her brother cut her off. "No. What would be the sense in that?" He let the silence stretch a moment, then added, "But for you, there are many names to choose from." His eyes roved across the triclinium, scanning the gathered guests. "You could name the child Tigellinus," he said lightly, "or perhaps Asprenus." Then his gaze settled on their uncle, seated beside her. "What about Claudius?" Agrippinilla's face flushed, a mixture of rage and shame. Caligula smirked. "A curious thing, isn't it, uncle?" he went on, swirling his wine cup in slow, lazy circles. "My dear sister went 6 years without quickening, until after those divine little gatherings we used to have. You remember them, don't you, Uncle Claudius? He tilted his head mockingly. Or perhaps you don't. You never could hold your wine. Still, it does my heart good to know that even the old Claudians can still surprise us. On her other side, Agrippinilla's husband, Domitius Ionobarbus, threw his head back and laughed, loud, coarse, and far too long. Outraged and humiliated, Agrippinilla wriggled her way off the couch and swept from the hall, her exit nearly swallowed by the titter of whispers and the slow return of conversation and laughter. The birth pangs were greater than Agrippinilla could have ever imagined. Like all first-time mothers, she had heard the horror stories. Every woman she knew had one, eager, almost triumphant in the telling. Each story more dreadful than the last. Torn flesh, days of labour, babies born still and purple. They recounted them as warnings, or perhaps as credentials, proof of what they had survived. Agrippinilla, of course, had listened politely, but like so many new mothers, she had assumed they were exaggerating. After all, these women were still alive, sitting upright, smiling, proudly recounting their trials as though they had faced death and bested it with nothing more than a scream. But now she understood. Not the words they had used, those crude warnings and florid metaphors whispered over weaving looms. No, she understood something deeper, that look that had passed behind their eyes as they told her, the look they could not put into words. Because there were no words. The pain was beyond anything she had imagined. Not sharp, but tidal. It surged through her again and again like something ancient and inexorable, as though her body was being split open by the gods themselves. She gripped the ropes that hung from the ceiling over her birthing stool. Gritting her teeth, she bore down hard and let out a guttural, animal cry. But still, the child would not come. The midwives murmured to one another, their hands hovering, their eyes meeting in silent, knowing glances. The peacefulness of Antium had not delivered what they had promised. The baby had never dropped into place before the first pang struck, a quiet warning they now tried not to voice aloud. But Agrippinilla felt the shift, not just in her body, but in the room. Something wasn't right. The next contraction, worse than the previous, ended with what felt like a small release, as Agrippinilla, hanging on the ropes, let her head drop back. Was that the head? She asked between gasping breaths. But the midwives did not reply. Moving as one, the women took her from the stool and walked her to the bed. "The baby is breech," one of them said in a worried tone. "We have to turn it." Before Agrippinilla could protest, she was laid on her back. Then, without ceremony, the midwife forced the child's leg back into her. The pain was white-hot, immediate. Agrippinilla screamed, her limbs trembling. As the next contraction swelled through her body, she cried out again, the brutal hands inside her, trying to turn the child before the gods ripped her open. Then, just as Agrippinilla was ready to surrender to the promised comfort of death, the next two contractions tore through her, and the child finally slipped free and into the hands of the midwives. She collapsed back onto the bed, gasping once, then lost consciousness. Agrippinilla opened her eyes. She lay in the same bed where she had given birth, though the linens were clean now. The birthing chair was gone. So were the ropes, as if the whole ordeal had been a dream. But the moment she tried to move, she knew it had been real. The deep ache in her hips, the packed rags staunching the flow of blood, the slow, raw breath that scraped in her throat. It had happened. All of it. "The baby," she said, voice hoarse. "Did it survive?" "Here, Domina," said one of the midwives, lifting the child from the cradle. It was wrapped so tightly in its blanket, limbs tucked in and face barely visible, that it looked more like a garden grub than a human. Pale, squirming, and new to the world. Agrippinilla stared. "Boy or girl?" she managed weakly. "You have a son," came a voice from the doorway. She turned her head, slowly. Her husband, Domitius Aenobarbus, stood there, hands behind his back, chin lifted as if he were greeting a political ally, rather than his newborn son. With slow, measured steps, he crossed the room and stood over her, as the midwife laid the swaddled infant beside her. Agrippinilla looked up at him, searching his face. "Did you—" she began, then her voice trailed off. Aenobarbus glanced at the child without reaching for it. "Did I claim him? Is that what you want to know?" She nodded. What choice did I have? My friends from Rome were all standing there, waiting to congratulate me. He gave a half shrug, so I picked the child up off the floor and gave him the name, Lucius Domitius. Agrippinilla closed her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, as if the matter was settled, Aenobarbus turned to the midwife. "Make sure the astrologer is summoned. As I told my friends, nothing produced by she and I can possibly be good for the state or for the Roman people. But let's just see what the stars have to say, shall we?" As Aenobarbus left the room, Agrippinilla lowered her eyes to the bundle beside her, to the tiny red face still puckered from the effort of being born. A son, at last. Not her husband's legacy, not her brother's, but a legacy of her own.